The morning I realized my brand new car was gone, the silence felt louder than any scream. I stood barefoot on the cold driveway, coffee still steaming in my hand, staring at the empty space where my car had been parked just hours earlier. The cement still carried the faint outline of the tires, like a cruel joke reminding me that it had been real. That the months of saving, the overtime shifts, the skipped dinners, the sacrifices, it hadn't been a dream. But the car was gone. At first, my mind went to the obvious. Theft. I checked my pockets, my bag, my jacket. My keys were still there, heavy and real in my palm. My heart started pounding harder. I ran back inside, checked the cameras. Nothing, no alarms, no broken glass. Then I called my parents. My mother answered on the third ring, her voice calm, almost bored. "Amy, my car is missing," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Did anyone move it?" There was a pause, a short one, too short. "Oh," she said lightly, "your sister needed it." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because my brain refused to accept what my ears had heard. "What do you mean needed it?" I asked. "How did she even get the keys?" Another pause, this time longer. "We gave them to her," my father said in the background, his voice firm, final. "Don't make a big issue." The coffee cup slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. "You gave her my keys," I whispered. "It's my car, I just bought it last week." My mother sighed, annoyed. "Why are you acting like this? She's your sister. She wanted to go out with her friends. You weren't using it." I wasn't using it. The words burned deeper than any insult. That car wasn't a luxury. It was my freedom, my proof to myself and everyone else that I could stand on my own. I had paid every installment myself. No help, no shortcuts. While my sister had everything handed to her, I had worked silently, invisibly for years. "Bring it back," I said, "now." Instead of answering, my mother hung up. By the time I reached the house, my chest felt tight, like something heavy was sitting on it. My sister's laughter echoed from the living room. Friends, music, snacks spread across the table like it was a celebration. There she was, my car keys twirling around her finger. "Oh, look," she said loudly, smirking. "The owner is here." Everyone laughed. My face burned. Not one person defended me, not one. I looked at my parents, waiting for them to say something, anything. My father didn't even look up from his phone. "Don't embarrass us in front of guests," he said flatly. "Sit down." That was the moment something inside me cracked. I didn't shout, I didn't cry, I didn't beg. I stood there, humiliated in my own home, reduced to a joke for my sister's entertainment. She bragged openly about how fast the car was, how people stared, how it felt finally driving something decent. Something I had earned. Something she had taken. When she tossed the keys onto the table like they meant nothing, I realized the truth I had been avoiding my whole life. This wasn't about the car. This was about power. And I had just lost it, publicly. So I did the only thing they never expected. I smiled. I picked up my bag, walked out without another word, and let them think they had won. Because silence, I had learned that day, can be far more dangerous than anger. And what they didn't know yet was that giving my keys away was the biggest mistake they would ever make. I didn't go home that night. Not because I had nowhere to go, but because I finally understood that home was no longer a place where I was seen. I drove to a quiet street near my office, parked my old bike under a flickering streetlight, and sat there long after the city went to sleep. My phone buzzed nonstop, missed calls, messages, voice notes, but I didn't open a single one. For the first time in my life, I chose silence. And silence did something strange. It cleared the noise. I replayed the scene in my head over and over. My sister's laughter, my parents' indifference, the guests watching like it was free entertainment. I realized something that hurt more than the humiliation itself. This wasn't new. This was just the first time it happened in public. Every achievement I'd ever had was minimized. Every sacrifice ignored. When my sister failed, it was explained away. When I succeeded, it was expected, or worse, inconvenient. The car was just proof. Proof that no matter how hard I worked, I would always be considered less important. By morning, my phone had gone quiet. No apology. No explanation. Just a single message from my mother. "You are overreacting. Come home." That sentence decided everything. I didn't reply. Instead, I called my office and asked for the day off. Then I walked into a cafe I had passed 100 times but never entered, because I was always in a hurry to get home, to be available, to be useful. I ordered tea, opened my laptop, and logged into my bank account. Seeing the numbers grounded me. Every payment for that car, mine. Every document, mine. Every insurance detail, mine. They had my keys, yes, but they didn't have ownership. And that's when the shift began. I contacted the dealership first, explained calmly that my vehicle was taken without my consent by a family member. They advised me to immediately secure the car digitally. Within minutes, I had disabled remote access and placed a temporary block through the connected service. The car could still move, but every system, every record, every alert now pointed back to me. Next, I called the insurance company. "What if someone else is driving the vehicle?" I asked casually. "Then they are not covered," the agent replied. I thanked them and ended the call. No drama. No shouting. No threats. Just facts. By noon, my sister had noticed something was wrong. I know because the messages started flooding in. "Why is the dashboard showing warnings? Did you mess with something? Stop acting childish." I still didn't reply. Instead, I walked into the bank branch where I had taken the loan. I updated my contact details, clarified sole ownership, and requested written confirmation of responsibility in case of misuse. The manager looked at me for a long moment before nodding. "You're protecting yourself," he said. "Yes," I replied. "I finally am." By evening, my father called. Not angry. Not calm. Worried. "Where are you?" he asked. "Safe," I said. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded. "You're creating problems." I smiled, though he couldn't see it. "No," I said quietly. "I'm stepping out of them." There was a long pause. Then came the line I had heard my entire life. "Family doesn't behave like this." I almost laughed. "Family doesn't steal," I replied. "Family doesn't humiliate. Family doesn't decide that one child deserves everything while the other deserves silence." He raised his voice. I didn't. That difference, that calm, shifted the balance more than any argument ever could. That night, my sister posted pictures online. My car. Her friends. Laughing emojis. Caption: "Some people can't handle sharing." The comments were cruel, mocking. People I barely knew joined in. I took screenshots. Not to expose her. To remember. Because power doesn't come from reacting. It comes from timing. The next morning, my phone rang again. This time, it was my mother. "Come home," she said sharply. "We need to talk." "I will," I replied, "when my car is parked where it belongs." "You're threatening us now," she snapped. "No," I said evenly. "I'm setting conditions." Silence on the other end. They had never heard that tone from me before. By afternoon, my sister was stranded. The car hadn't stopped, but alerts had. Features failed. Navigation froze. A minor issue, technically, but enough to shake her confidence. Enough to make her realize that possession without control is temporary. She called me directly. "You're embarrassing me," she hissed. "My friends are watching." I leaned back in my chair. "Interesting," I said. "Now you know how that feels." She went quiet. That was the moment I knew. The power had shifted. Not because I yelled. Not because I demanded. But because I stopped begging for fairness and started enforcing boundaries. That night, I finally went home. The house was quiet, too quiet. My car sat in the driveway again, parked crookedly, like it didn't quite belong anymore. Neither did I. But I walked past it. Because the next step wasn't about taking something back. It was about making them understand the cost of taking it in the first place. And that cost was about to be paid in full. I didn't touch the car for 3 days. That confused them more than anything else. It sat there in the driveway like an accusation, washed, fueled, keys placed neatly on the side table where everyone could see them. My mother glanced at it every morning. My father slowed down whenever he passed it. My sister avoided looking at it altogether. They were waiting for me to explode. They had built their whole understanding of me around one assumption. I would eventually give in. But I didn't. I woke up early, left the house quietly, and returned late. I stopped explaining where I was going. I stopped asking permission. I stopped adjusting my tone to make others comfortable. That alone unsettled them. On the 4th evening, my father finally snapped. "Are you enjoying this?" he asked at dinner, his voice tight. "This tension." I took a slow bite of food, chewed carefully, and swallowed before answering. "No," I said, "I'm observing." My sister laughed nervously. "Observing what?" "How easily people panic," I replied, looking straight at her. "When they realize control isn't permanent." The table went silent. That night, I sent exactly 3 emails. The first was to the insurance company, formally documenting unauthorized use of the vehicle with dates, screenshots, and witness confirmation. No claim, no accusation, just a record. The second was to the car dealership service department, scheduling a full system audit and ownership verification. Again, routine, calm, professional. The third email was the most important. It went to my sister's workplace. Not to complain. To confirm. I politely asked whether an employee benefit she had recently claimed, transport assistance, required personal vehicle ownership, because there seemed to be confusion regarding registration and usage. I didn't accuse her of anything. I simply asked a question. And questions, I had learned, were far more dangerous than statements. 2 days later, everything unraveled. My sister stormed into the house just after noon, slamming the door so hard a picture frame fell from the wall. "What did you do?" she screamed. My parents rushed out. I stayed seated on the couch. She threw her phone onto the table. An email glowed on the screen. Her company wanted clarification, documentation, proof. She had listed my car as hers. Used it for status, for benefits, for image. Fraud, unintentional or not, was still fraud. "I didn't mean it like that," she cried, turning to my parents. "You told me it was fine." My mother froze. My father's face went pale. They looked at me then, not with anger, not with authority, but with something new. Fear. "I didn't report you," I said calmly. "I didn't accuse you. I didn't even contact HR directly. I asked a general question." My sister's voice dropped to a whisper. "You planned this." I shook my head. "No," I said. "You exposed yourself." She lunged forward. "Fix this, call them back, say it was a mistake." I finally stood. "This," I said quietly, "is the part where you feel powerless." She stared at me, stunned. "You felt powerful when you took my keys," I continued. "When you laughed in front of your friends, when you let them mock me, you enjoyed that." My mother interrupted sharply. "Enough, this has gone too far." I turned to her slowly. "Too far," I repeated. "Like giving away something that didn't belong to you, like humiliating your own child in public, or like teaching one daughter she can take whatever she wants and the other should stay silent." She opened her mouth. No words came out. The phone rang. My sister answered with shaking hands. It was her manager. The call was short. When she hung up, she collapsed onto the chair. "They've suspended me," she whispered, "until this is resolved." My father exploded. "Why would you do this to your own sister?" I didn't raise my voice. "I didn't do anything to her," I said. "I stopped protecting her from consequences." That sentence hit harder than any shout. For the first time, my parents saw the full picture, not through emotion, not through excuses, but through real-world consequences they couldn't control. My sister cried all night. My mother didn't sleep. My father paced. And I slept peacefully, for the first time in years. The next morning, my sister came to me. No audience, no drama. Just her. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't think it would go this far." I studied her face. The entitlement was gone, replaced by fear. "It only went as far as it needed to," I replied. She swallowed. "What do you want?" There it was. The question she had never had to ask before. "I want my name cleared," I said. "I want you to tell the truth to your workplace, to our parents, and to yourself. And I want something else." She nodded quickly. "Anything." "I want you to say it out loud," I said. "That the car was never yours, that you took it without permission, and that what you did was wrong." She hesitated. Then she said it. Every word. My parents listened from the doorway. And something changed in them too. That evening, my father sat beside me. "We failed you," he said quietly. I didn't respond. "I thought keeping peace meant sacrificing you," he continued. "I see now it just made things worse." I looked at him then, not with forgiveness, not with anger, but with clarity. "Peace that requires silence from only one person," I said, "isn't peace, it's control." He nodded. The next day, my sister corrected the record at work. The suspension was lifted with a warning, a permanent one. The posts came down, the jokes stopped, the whispers faded. But something else remained. Respect. Not because they loved me more, but because they understood now. I was no longer safe to mistreat. And that realization, that was the real revenge. The house didn't feel the same after that. Not quieter, just honest. No one laughed too loudly anymore. No one spoke over anyone else. Even the walls seemed to listen differently, like they were finally hearing the truth after years of polite lies. My sister avoided me at first. When she did speak, her tone was careful, measured, as if she were afraid a single wrong word might undo everything she had barely managed to repair. My parents, on the other hand, tried too hard. "Did you eat? Do you need anything? Take the car if you want." They offered these things like peace offerings. Small and frequent, hopping repetition would erase memory. It didn't. Justice doesn't work that way. Justice isn't about replacing harm with kindness. It's about acknowledging harm without conditions. One evening, my mother finally said what she had been circling for days. "We never meant to hurt you," she said softly, folding laundry that didn't need folding. I looked up. "Intent doesn't cancel impact," I replied. She froze. I hadn't said it to be cruel. I said it because it was true, and because it was something I had learned the hard way. She sat down slowly. "I thought if you stayed quiet, things would stay peaceful." "That peace cost me my voice," I said, "and you didn't notice because you weren't the one paying." Tears filled her eyes. Real ones this time, not dramatic, not defensive. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for choosing the easier child." That sentence mattered more than any apology before it, because it named the truth. From that day on, the rules changed. Not written, not announced, but enforced by something stronger than authority. Awareness. My sister began doing her own things, paying her own way, asking instead of assuming. The entitlement that once filled every room she entered had shrunk, replaced by caution and, slowly, humility. One afternoon, she approached me while I was cleaning the car. "I never asked how you managed to buy it," she said. "I didn't stop what I was doing. You never had to." She nodded. "I should have." That was progress. Weeks passed, then months. The car stayed mine, not just legally but symbolically. No one touched it without asking. No one joked about it. No one treated it like family property. But the real change wasn't about metal and keys. It was about space. I started spending more time outside the house, not to escape, but because I finally had permission from myself to live fully. I took trips alone, made plans without explaining. I stopped shrinking to fit expectations that were never fair to begin with. And something unexpected happened. My parents started listening. Really listening. Not interrupting, not correcting, not dismissing. When I spoke, they waited. When I set boundaries, they respected them. Not perfectly, but genuinely. One night during a family gathering, smaller this time, quieter, someone joked about siblings sharing everything. My sister stiffened. Before I could speak, she said calmly, "Sharing isn't taking, and respect isn't optional." The room went silent. I met her eyes. She nodded once. That nod wasn't forgiveness. It was acknowledgement. And that was enough. Later that night, my father sat beside me on the porch. "You know," he said slowly, "I was angry at you at first." I smiled faintly. "I know. But now," he continued, "I see that you didn't break the family. You revealed the cracks." He looked at me, voice heavy with something like regret. "We should have protected you." I looked out at the dark street, the quiet hum of life continuing beyond our mistakes. "You still can," I said, "by not asking me to disappear for comfort again." He nodded. And that was the final shift. Not dominance. Not victory. Balance. Because power that comes from fear is fragile. But power that comes from self-respect, that lasts. I didn't need to punish them anymore. Life had done its part. They lost their illusion of control. My sister lost her entitlement. And I gained something far more valuable than revenge. Myself. The loud part of the story ended long before anyone realized it had. No more shouting. No dramatic confrontations. No slammed doors or desperate apologies. What remained was something far more powerful and far more permanent. Choice. I began waking up early again, not out of anxiety, but intention. Morning drives became my ritual. No destination. No music at first. Just the steady hum of the engine and the knowledge that every turn I made was mine alone. The car had stopped being a symbol of conflict. It had become a reminder. Not of what was taken, but of what I refused to lose again. At home, things settled into a new rhythm. Not warm, not cold. Honest. My mother stopped hovering. She spoke carefully now, like someone relearning a language she had taken for granted. When she crossed a boundary, and she still did sometimes, she corrected herself without being prompted. That mattered. My father became quieter, more reflective. He no longer tried to control outcomes. Instead, he asked questions. "How do you feel about this? What do you want to do?" Questions he had never asked me before. And my sister. She changed the most. Not overnight, not magically, but visibly. She stopped borrowing without asking. She started paying her own expenses. When she wanted help, she asked instead of assuming it would be given. One evening, she sat beside me while I was sorting papers. "I used to think you were weak," she admitted, "because you didn't fight." I didn't look up. I wasn't weak. I was trained to survive quietly. She swallowed. "I don't want to be that person anymore." I nodded once, "Then don't be." Redemption isn't something you grant. It's something people earn, over time with consistency. Months passed. I moved out. Not in anger. Not in escape. In growth. The day I packed my things, my parents didn't stop me. They helped. My mother folded my clothes carefully. My father carried boxes without complaint. No guilt, no manipulation. Just acceptance. Before I left, my mother held my hand. "You taught us something," she said softly. I smiled gently. I learned it the hard way. My new place was small, quiet, mine. The first night there, I parked my car outside, locked it, and stood for a moment just looking at it. Not with pride. With peace. The kind that comes when you know no one can take what you've already claimed within yourself. I didn't cut my family off. I didn't punish them with absence. I stayed on my terms. Visits became invitations, not obligations. Calls became conversations, not interrogations. If something felt wrong, I said so. If it wasn't respected, I left. No explanations. No guilt. Just boundaries. And here's the truth most people don't expect. Revenge didn't feel like victory. Freedom did. The shock was what happened to my sister. It was what happened to me. I stopped doubting my worth. Stopped asking permission to exist fully. Stopped confusing silence with strength. One afternoon, long after the dust had settled, I ran into one of the friends who had laughed that day. "The car thing," she said awkwardly. "That was intense." I smiled politely. "It was necessary." She nodded slowly. "You're different now." "I am," I agreed. Different doesn't always mean louder. Sometimes it means unmovable. The final lesson came unexpectedly. At a family gathering, a relative joked, "You're lucky you have parents who care so much." I didn't correct them. I didn't explain. I simply smiled. Because care without respect is control. And respect, once earned, never needs to be defended again. The car still runs perfectly. But the real journey began the moment I stopped chasing fairness and started creating justice. Quietly. Completely. There are stories that end with applause. This one ended with understanding. Years later, people would still ask me about the car as if it had been the most important part. They wanted details, the drama, the moment I won. They leaned in, waiting for something loud and satisfying. I always disappointed them. Because the truth was quieter than they expected. The car wasn't the victory. The confrontation wasn't the victory. Even the apology wasn't the victory. The victory was this. I never let anyone convince me again that my silence was proof of love. That lesson followed me everywhere. At work, when someone tried to take credit for my effort, I spoke, calmly, clearly, without fear of being disliked. In friendships, when boundaries were tested, I named them early. In relationships, when respect felt conditional, I walked away before it turned into humiliation. I stopped waiting for permission to be treated well. And something remarkable happened. People adjusted. Not because I demanded it, but because I no longer accepted less. My family felt that change most sharply. My parents aged into gentler versions of themselves, not perfect, but honest. When old habits surfaced, they caught themselves. Once my mother said, "You don't have to prove anything." I smiled. "I know, that's why I'm calm." My father once admitted something he had never said out loud. "We thought strength meant endurance," he said. "We didn't realize it could also mean refusal." That sentence told me everything. My sister and I found a fragile, careful peace. We weren't close. We weren't enemies. We were real. One day, she asked me why I hadn't destroyed her when I had the chance. I considered the question carefully. "Because humiliation teaches fear," I said, "and fear creates more damage. I wanted understanding." She nodded slowly. "You succeeded." Time softened the sharp edges of memory, but it never erased the lesson. Every time I parked my car somewhere public, every time I handed my keys to a valet, every time someone asked, "Can I use it?" I heard the echo of that first morning. The empty driveway. The laughter. The dismissal. And instead of anger, I felt gratitude. Because pain, when faced honestly, becomes instruction. I learned this. People will test you, not because they are evil, but because they are comfortable. They will take what you allow. They will define you by what you tolerate. And the moment you stop tolerating disrespect, you don't need revenge. Life delivers justice on your behalf. I never announced my boundaries. I lived them. That's why they lasted. At the last family gathering before I moved cities, My father raised a quiet toast. To growth, he said, and to learning when to listen. Everyone nodded. My sister met my eyes from across the table. There was no apology there. There didn't need to be. Respect doesn't shout. It stands. As I left that night, I walked past my car, keys warm in my pocket, and paused. Not to admire it. To remember the version of myself who once stood barefoot on a driveway, heart racing, believing something precious had been stolen. I wish I could tell that version of me one thing. Not that it would be okay, but that it would be better. Because the greatest loss that night wasn't a car. It was an illusion. The illusion that love requires self-erasure. That family excuses harm. That staying quiet keeps the peace. And the greatest gain. The knowledge that dignity, once claimed, changes everything. So if you're listening to this story, wondering what you would have done, here's the line you'll never forget. The moment I stopped asking to be treated fairly and started demanding respect through my actions, everything changed. Not loudly,